Welcome to the Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame. Today I'm going to be looking at a story of cardboard regarding the 1989 Fleer Billy Ripken error card. We'll just go with that. This is a card that is a tremendous testament to the importance of thinking things through. That's the best way to describe it. Now, in the history of sports cards, there have been a number of notable error cards or cards that should have been cleaned up through the years. There have been a lot of cards where the cleanup already happened before it ever made it into packs. They were airbrushed beforehand, whether cleanly or not. But what's interesting is when a card is released and then down the road somebody realizes that there is something wrong with it, whether it is an error that needs to be corrected or something that was not really an error as much as it really wasn't appropriate. Whatever that is, it's interesting to see how collectors respond to it. Because we as collectors, we love the ability to collect more. And over the years, through the decades, there have been a lot of cases where there are cards that are in lower supply than any others, which are called SP cards, referring to short print. Now, the most famous of those is the T206 Honus Wagner card, which is a short print because they were all pulled out. There was a lawsuit that said you cannot release these cards, and so they were pulled out and never released, or for the most part, they were never released. But there have been other cases where usually the reason a card is short printed is because the way that they lay out the printing sheets, there is not enough room for certain cards to show up a second time on a printing sheet. So there are less of those cards being printed, or the equivalent being double printed. So through card collecting, that's been a big thing. But also sometimes you just get damaged cards that get pulled out because a card may be on the corner of a sheet that just happens to get damaged a lot. There are different reasons for a card to not be as common as other cards in the set. And so collectors love the ability to make sure that they get those rare cards. But what's even more impressive is when there's a version where there are two different types of cards, and so you can get the card in this version or you can get in that version. That really excites a collector because now it is making the collecting process more adventurous. And boy, in the 1980s, with the haphazard nature of making cards that were never intended to really be serious, they were cranked out for kids and they were done cheaply. It's really easy to make mistakes that need to be corrected, and oh boy, there were a lot of them through that decade. And some of them stood out a lot more distinctly than others, whether that's because they were cleaned up really early or really late in the print run, which means that one of the versions is a lot harder to get than another, or just because there's some context to what's cleaned up that is really special. The best example of that is the 1990 Pro Set Fred Marion card, where you got John Taylor on the card and his belt was loose. Well, his belt wasn't loose as much as the end of the belt was visible in a way that was, for an adult, nobody would care about the belt. But for somebody with a juvenile mind, it came across as pretty inappropriate. They cleaned it up. They did it right. They came in, they cleaned it up one time, one shot, it's gone. And in fact, most people never even knew about the change. I found out about that. I had kind of seen that there was something, but I never really looked into it until I started the Sports Card Professor project. And when I started that, I needed to look it up. I went home, pulled out my binder, and in my binder was the original error card. And I was shocked, not so much at what was on the card as much as I was shocked that I had such a rare card, and it told me that I happened to be collecting these cards very early in their print run because I was able to get one of these cards and I never knew it. I had a really rare card for a long period of time because it wasn't really a big point of conversation. Likewise, Pro Set also had a Dexter Manley card where they were a little bit more open in their discussion about his past, and they cleaned that up. I do not have one of the originals of those, by the way. But that's the right way to do it. You go in and you just make a clean change, and most people will never know about it because it's just a simple change, and it's just another one of those cards where there are two versions. Over in baseball, Donruss had a card where in the background they had I think it was a Marlboro sign, and they cleaned that up so that you couldn't see it. Very simple. Not much of a conversation. But with Billy Ripken's card, it was different. Now, the card itself is partially infamous because what was on it. What it is he's holding some baseball bats, and one of the bats on the end has a phrase on it, as it were, a nickname that is not suitable for kids. And that's all. It actually wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it certainly was a big deal, but not the kind of thing where you're going to know about it over time. The Fred Marion card, it is known as the John Taylor belt card. It's not anything explicit, it's just the John Taylor belt card. Okay, if you don't know what to look for, you're trying to figure out what's wrong with the belt on the side of his jersey, and it's going to be confusing. This, on the other case, is known as the F-face card. It's written down as the F-face card. It's a cleaned up version, but it's literally written out. So you could have said text on knob. That would have worked. It's also a little dirty, I guess, but that would have worked that would work just fine. Or the text on bat card or something like that. It's easy to find another way of describing it, but the reason that it's described as the F-face card is very simple. We all know about the card. It is a legendary card. And why? Not because of the text. It's because of Fleer's failure in cleaning it up right. Step number 1. They took a bandsaw through cards so that they could pull them out. But those bandsawed cards where there's a slit cut through them, those still made it out into packs. And so there are bandsawed cards with a slit. So there's that version. Then they took little white stickers and stuck those stickers on the cards and covered it up. Dumb idea. Those cards made it out into packs, but here's the problem with that. You got kids going, what's that white sticker for? And they're going to take it off. In fact, that's the most rare part of the version of the card, because most of the cards lost the sticker. If there's a card that still has the sticker, that is a really, really rare card. But it also meant that now there's this whole storyline of they put stickers on each individual card. They followed that up by taking a black marker and hand scribbling it out. Again, labor consuming, but at least now you couldn't take a sticker off and see the text behind. So now you're getting a little bit better in terms of cleaning it up, but you got another version of it. And then finally, they had the printing plate scratched out with a black box. Now, at the end of the day, when you look at all of this, it begs the question, why didn't they just take the printing plates and change them so that there's just a sheet of brown or tan, the color of the baseball bat, at the end? Because if that's what they had done, like Pro Set did with the John Taylor belt card, the Fred Marion card, if that's what they had done and they had just cleaned it up in a really clean, precise way so that it just blends in, the conversation would have died down so much. But right now, if you go buy a complete set or buy enough packs that you get one of the Billy Ripken cards, it's going to have this weird black box right on the card. So 1, it looks tacky. But 2, this different versions make the whole idea of SP cards. Now you have multiple SP cards. You can get the original card with the text. You can get the card that still has the text but has the slit cut through it. You can get the card with the white sticker, if you're really lucky. You can get the card with the scribble, or you can get the card with the black box. That's 5 different versions of the card. So now you've turned it into a super iconic card. Instead of just cleaning it up right at the beginning or whenever they got to it, they instead did the exact opposite where they wanted to bury it. Well, now it's just out in the sunlight. And Pro Set did have an easier time because they had their own factory and they could just call down and make changes at will, which they did all the time, which means they could clean things up really easily. They could also easily make mistakes. There's a lot that was going on with that. But Fleer continued to work even into 1991. They continued to make super cheap cards. That's just what they did. It's what Don Russ did. It's what Topps did. So it's really not surprising that they kind of hacked it up because everything was done in such an offhanded way. And that was really the spirit of how cards were crafted in the 1980s, was this is cheap stuff for kids. Who cares? But by 1989, we had evolved to where now we were serious collectors, really working hard to pursue whatever we could. And so instead of just kind of slipping something under the rug, no one's ever going to notice because they're going to throw these cards away anyway, we were all now paying extra attention, but we were also looking for an opportunity. And it was the perfect time for Fleer to show just how behind the times they were. And it's kind of weird to say that because Score was only in its second year. Upper Deck was just launching, as was Pro Set, as was NBA Hoops, as was Action Packed. So we were just at the dawn of modern cards, but Fleer really was showing that they were still back in the 70s with their mentality of these cards, because this just didn't fly in the modern era, and they'd really everybody would have to make sure that they did a better job down the road, which again, Pro Set did. Pro Set was a lot better at making sure that when they cleaned things up, they did it cleanly. Fleer, not at all. So in their efforts to try to clean up a mess so that nobody would notice, they botched it so badly that it made it even more obvious than it otherwise would. Really fascinating story and a really iconic card because it is easily the most famous error card of all time, thanks to Fleer. So that's what I wanted to talk about with this story of cardboard. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for following along all this way. I am going to be still doing a video next week, which is going to be on the importance of gum in the history of trading cards, which is pretty fascinating. So definitely look out for that video. If you haven't subscribed, I do urge you to do so that you can keep track of all of these stories of sports card history that I'm going through subject by subject by subject. I love doing this. It's fun to really focus in on each of these subjects. So definitely do that if you haven't done so already. And thank you very much for watching.